In 2008, Daniel Cross signed the trailhead log for a short hike in Boulder Canyon and never returned. For years, searchers found nothing. No gear, no tracks, no answers. But 6 years later, a hidden motion-activated camera was discovered strapped high in the pines. On its footage, Daniel appears in his final moments, walking slower, glancing over his shoulder, his eyes wide with fear. And just behind him, half hidden in the trees, the blurred outline of a figure looms before the camera cuts to silence. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support means the world and helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us until the end, and if this mystery moves you, share your thoughts in the comments and pass it along to a friend. The file landed on a desk in Boulder like so many others. Another missing hiker, another case long gone cold. But what made this one different was the footage. Not from his phone, not from any search party, footage from a camera no one knew existed until years later. In 2008, Daniel Cross signed into the trailhead logbook just after sunrise. His name, neat block letters, was the last ordinary record of his life. By nightfall, he hadn't returned. Searchers combed the woods, helicopters circled, and his family begged for answers. Nothing. He was declared lost, another soul swallowed by the Rockies. But 6 years later, a motion-activated wildlife camera was found strapped high to a tree on that same trail. And on its tape were Daniel's final moments. Silent, grainy, but undeniable. The camera had been watching all along. Daniel Cross wasn't reckless. At 32, he lived a steady life in Boulder, working as a freelance photographer. Friends described him as quiet, methodical, the kind of man who checked batteries twice before leaving home. Hiking was his escape, a way to balance the hours spent hunched over editing screens. He wasn't a stranger to the mountains. Since college, Daniel had logged hundreds of miles on Colorado trails, often carrying only a camera bag and a flask of black coffee. His neighbors saw him leave most weekends, shoulders squared, boots polished, tripod strapped neatly across his pack. That guy knew what he was doing, one friend would later insist. Yet Daniel wasn't careless with risks. He left itineraries with his sister, texted trail names before heading out. He favored marked routes, the kind families hiked on summer weekends. That morning in 2008, he told a coworker he'd be back before dusk, just a short hike, nothing dramatic. No one thought it would be his last. The trail Daniel chose wound out of Boulder Canyon, climbing into pine forest where sunlight flickered in sharp beams through tall trunks. Early hikers that morning remembered the smell, sap warming in the heat, damp earth still holding last night's rain. Birds scattered as boots pressed gravel, the air sharp with mountain chill. The path itself was narrow but well-worn, cutting past boulders laced with moss, then opening into a meadow where wildflowers swayed under the wind. To the west, the Rockies rose jagged and endless, their peaks dusted white even in June. To the east, the land dropped into shadowed ravines where light barely touched the ground. Locals called it safe, even easy, but those who knew the terrain said the forest could turn without warning. A step-off trail could lead into sudden drop-offs, dense brush, or caves you'd never see until you were standing at their mouths. It was beautiful, yes, but unforgiving. That morning, Daniel walked into it alone, his camera swinging at his side. On June 7, 2008, Daniel parked his aging Subaru at the trailhead just after sunrise. The lot was half empty, dew still clinging to windshields. He zipped his jacket, slung his camera bag over one shoulder, and signed the logbook. Daniel Cross, 9:12 a.m. His handwriting, neat and steady, was the last certain trace of him. Witnesses later recalled seeing him adjust his tripod straps, pausing to take a long breath before stepping onto the trail. Nothing unusual, no hurry, no hesitation. One couple passed him near the first mile marker. He nodded politely, camera hanging loose, eyes scanning the tree line as if framing a shot. They remembered his calm, deliberate pace. By noon, clouds rolled in. Wind swept through the canyon, carrying the smell of rain. The couple returned to the lot hours later, but Daniel's car was still there. As night fell and the Subaru sat alone under the flickering trail lamp, unease began to spread. Daniel never signed back out. By sundown, Daniel's absence couldn't be brushed off. His sister called his phone, straight to voicemail. Friends assumed maybe he'd stayed out to capture sunset shots, but by midnight the Subaru was still parked in the empty lot, windshield fogged, tripod bag gone. At 2 a.m., rangers were alerted. They checked the logbook, Daniel's name in neat letters, no sign-out time. His jacket was missing from the car, but inside lay a thermos of coffee, still half full, and a folded note with trail coordinates. His habit, a breadcrumb for safety. Search began at dawn. Volunteers with flashlights swept the path, calling his name into mist that clung low to the ground. Helicopters drummed overhead, beams cutting through pine. By afternoon, dogs were brought in. One caught a scent near the meadow, tugged hard toward a ravine, then froze, whining, refusing to move forward. By the second night, the trail carried only silence. Daniel was gone, as though the mountain had swallowed him whole. The official search exploded across the foothills. Rangers marked grids on maps, volunteers lined shoulder-to-shoulder combing brush, and dogs moved restlessly at their handlers' sides. For 2 days, the air throbbed with shouts, whistles, and helicopter blades. But the ground told a stranger story. Daniel's footprints were clear for the first mile, then abruptly vanished in a patch of loose gravel. No slide marks, no detour, just gone. One deputy muttered, like he lifted straight off the trail. Another found a single water bottle wedged under roots, the cap screwed on tight. Contradictions piled up. One team swore they heard a camera shutter echoing through the canyon late at night. Another insisted they saw a flicker of light deeper in the ravine, though no campsite was ever found. Locals gathered at the trailhead, arms crossed, trading whispers. Man knew these woods, no way he got lost. Then where the hell is he? After a week, the search scaled back. Helicopters left, volunteers returned home, and the forest settled into silence again. Daniel had vanished, leaving only questions scattered like breadcrumbs no one could follow. When the search teams pulled out, the silence left room for talk. At cafes in Boulder, hikers leaned across tables. Daniel wasn't careless, one said. Guy double-knotted his boots. If he vanished, something else happened. Another shrugged. Or maybe he wanted to disappear. Some people do. At the gear shop downtown, a clerk swore Daniel had come in the week before asking about survival knives. The rumor spread quick, though no receipt was ever found. A bartender told anyone who'd listen that Daniel kept to himself too much. Quiet ones always got secrets. Neighbors whispered in doorways. A woman said she'd seen him walking late at night with his camera, stopping to photograph empty streets. A man muttered that he never trusted loners out in the woods. To friends, it was cruel. They knew Daniel as cautious, steady, a man more likely to sketch a tree than chase danger. But gossip has a way of filling silence, and the silence around his name was wide, echoing, and hungry. In time, the whispers hardened into stories, and stories have a way of sticking longer than facts. By late June, the sheriff's office issued its first official report. The tone was blunt. Daniel Cross likely lost his way in the backcountry, succumbed to exposure, and his remains would never be found. They called it an unfortunate but not uncommon outcome in Colorado wilderness cases. For the family, it felt like dismissal. His sister stood outside the courthouse, clutching Daniel's last text on her flip phone, back by dusk. She told reporters, he left a note in his car, he signed the log. He planned. He didn't wander. The sheriff doubled down. At a press briefing, he said, there is no evidence of foul play. The most probable scenario is a misstep. His words rang rehearsed, even hollow. Meanwhile, locals debated in parking lots and diners. If he tripped, they'd have found something. Camera strap, lens cap, anything. Unless someone else got there first. The idea lingered, traded in low voices but never written down. Officially, Daniel was chalked up as another hiker lost to the Rockies. Unofficially, unease settled like a fog, refusing to lift. Weeks after the search ended, 2 college hikers stumbled on something the deputies had missed. Half buried in pine needles near a bend in the trail lay Daniel's backpack, zippers intact. Inside, his jacket neatly folded, a spare lens wrapped in cloth, trail mix untouched. No signs of struggle, no tear in the straps. The find reignited whispers. If he ditched it, why fold the jacket? One ranger asked under his breath. Stranger still, the pack was less than half a mile from the trailhead, an area already searched. Either it had been overlooked or placed there later. Close by, faint prints marked the dirt. Too wide to be Daniel's boots, too shallow for heavy hikers. Some swore they were fresh. Others insisted the wind had warped them. The sheriff's office logged the discovery, but downplayed it. Backpack may have been moved by weather or wildlife, the report read. The explanation didn't sit right with locals. At the pub, a man muttered, wildlife don't fold jackets. It was the only physical trace of Daniel ever recovered, and instead of answering questions, it deepened them. By 2009, the search funds dried up, and Daniel's case slid into the cold file drawer. His Subaru was eventually towed from the trailhead, the dust outline of its tires lingering on gravel like a scar. In Boulder, his name drifted into ghost story territory. Hikers told newcomers about the photographer who vanished when pointing toward the canyon. College kids swapped theories at bonfires. He walked into a cave and never came out. Others claimed his spirit still roamed the trail, camera in hand, forever searching for the last shot. For the family, silence was heavier. Birthdays passed with empty chairs. His sister kept his apartment untouched, plants wilted, camera gear boxed but never moved. Friends stopped calling, unsure what to say. At the gear shop, the clerk who'd once fueled the knife rumor muttered, "Guess he really didn't want to be found." A coworker shook his head, lowering his voice. Or maybe somebody didn't want him found. Years piled on. Daniel became less of a man and more of a mystery, his life reduced to whispers and an unanswered logbook entry. 6 years after Daniel vanished, a group of wildlife researchers set up new motion sensor cameras in the canyon. While climbing a ridge to mount one, a graduate student spotted an older unit, strapped high on a pine, half camouflaged in bark and moss. It wasn't theirs. The casing was weathered, screws rusted, but the memory card inside was intact. The team logged it, assuming it belonged to park staff. But when they turned it in, rangers frowned. No one claimed it. No official record of its placement existed. Curiosity took over. They ran the footage through lab software, expecting elk or bear patterns. Instead, the files showed timestamp sequences from 2008. And then, frame after frame of a lone man with a camera bag, walking the trail. Daniel Cross. The discovery dropped like a stone. For 6 years, a camera had been silently watching, capturing what no one else had seen, the last hours before he disappeared. The camera was rushed to a forensic lab in Denver. Technicians handled the memory card like it was evidence from a crime scene. Dust was blown away, corrosion cleaned, every byte extracted carefully. Despite years in the elements, the files survived, grainy, dark, but intact. The footage rolled frame by frame. Most clips were ordinary: deer moving at dawn, wind shaking branches, shadows stretching across the trail. But then the lens caught him. Daniel, camera strap across his chest, head slightly tilted as if studying something in the trees. He walked steadily, unaware he was being watched. Investigators leaned closer. The timestamps matched the very day he disappeared. The last clear image anyone had of him wasn't from a memory or a witness. It was from this hidden device. One agent whispered, "This is it." His last steps. The camera, silent for 6 years, had preserved a secret that might finally explain, or deepen, the mystery. Investigators gathered in a dim lab, the screen flickering with clips that seemed harmless at first. Daniel appeared in short bursts, moving past the lens at different times of day. He adjusted his straps, paused to sip from a bottle, crouched to tie his boot. Ordinary motions, almost boring. Yet something about his posture unsettled the room. In one frame he glanced over his shoulder, lips pressed tight, as if listening. In another he froze mid-step, camera dangling in his hand, eyes locked beyond the tree line. Technicians replayed the segments in loops, trying to catch details the human eye might miss. They enhanced contrast, sharpened shadows, but all that emerged was Daniel's steady presence, increasingly tense. One agent muttered, "It's like he knew someone else was out there." Another shifted uncomfortably in his chair. For hours, the footage showed nothing more than a man walking, hesitating, then walking again. But the silence between those steps felt louder than any sound. And then the strange clips began. The first odd frame looked almost like a trick of light, a blur in the tree line behind Daniel. Investigators paused, zoomed in, replayed. It wasn't wind. It wasn't an animal. It was upright, tall, and still. In another clip, just minutes later, Daniel adjusted his camera strap while, in the far corner of the frame, a shadow shifted between trees. No face, no detail, just movement that seemed to follow his pace. Technicians froze the image on a single frame. Daniel standing mid-trail, his body angled slightly away, while behind him, something darker than the forest itself leaned between the pines. When the footage advanced, it was gone. Around the lab, no one spoke for a long moment. Finally, one whispered, "That's not him. Someone else was there." For the first time, investigators had evidence Daniel wasn't alone on that trail. And whatever was with him, the camera had caught it. Just enough to raise questions, but not enough to answer them. The footage rolled on until it reached the last file, time-stamped just before dusk. Daniel walked slower now, shoulders hunched, camera clutched tight against his chest. He glanced left, then right, his stride breaking into halts, as if he heard something just outside the frame. Then came the final image. Daniel stood in the center of the trail, his face turned directly toward the camera. Eyes wide, mouth slightly open, as if mid-breath. Behind him, blurred but undeniable, loomed a shape in the tree line. Broad shoulders, a pale smear where a face should be, half hidden in shadows. The next frame was empty. Just the trail, branches swaying, light dimming. Daniel was gone. The lab fell silent. One agent leaned back, whispering, "That's the moment. That's when it happened." The camera had given them proof Daniel didn't vanish alone. But it stopped short of showing what followed, leaving only a cliff edge of fear. When the footage was shown to the sheriff's office, the response was swift and cold. At a press briefing, the spokesman called it interesting, but inconclusive. He insisted the blurred figure was likely an animal, distorted by low light. To them, the final frame was nothing more than Daniel turning toward the lens before walking off trail. The explanation didn't sit right. Reporters pressed. Then why did the search find no tracks? No body? No gear? Officials dodged, repeating the same phrase. The wilderness doesn't give back. Daniel's family was furious. His sister clutched stills from the video, her finger jabbing the shadow behind him. That is not a deer. That is not a bear. That's someone standing there. But the sheriff's office refused to label it foul play. For them, the case stayed unresolved hiker disappearance. The footage, instead of closure, became a wedge, splitting those who believed Daniel met with something human and those determined to fold him back into the wilderness. The footage leaked within weeks, and once it hit the public, the debates turned into wildfire. Online forums slowed the frames down, posting grainy stills circled in red. Some claimed the shadow was a man in heavy gear. Others swore it was something unnatural, too tall, too still. Wildlife experts went on record, arguing it was likely an elk or bear upright for a split second. A professor in Denver disagreed. No quadruped holds that posture without bracing. Locals had their own theories. At the tavern near Boulder Canyon, two men argued over beers. That was someone stalking him. You can see the shoulders. The other shook his head. It's just tricks of light. Woods'll mess with your eyes. Meanwhile, hikers on the same trail reported strange unease. One woman said she felt watched the whole way, glancing over her shoulder more times than she could count. Another left flowers at the mile marker where Daniel last appeared, whispering, whatever it was, he didn't walk out alone. The footage hadn't solved anything. It had only cracked the silence wider. For Daniel's family, the footage was both proof and torment. His sister clutched the printed stills in her hands until the paper creased, her voice shaking at a press conference. He wasn't alone out there. Look at him. He's afraid. And someone, is behind him. Officials tried to temper expectations, calling the shadow inconclusive, but the family pushed harder. They demanded a renewed investigation, begged for the trail to be researched, pleaded for the footage to be treated as evidence, not rumor. Behind closed doors, grief turned sharp. Friends recalled his mother whispering, "They're burying him twice, once in the forest, and again in excuses." Neighbors dropped off casseroles and folded notes, some with sympathy, some with quiet warnings. At the grocery store, a woman muttered, "Don't stir it up again. Let him rest." His sister overheard, her reply cutting, "Rest? He never came home." The family's anger became its own form of searchlight, refusing to let Daniel fade into just another lost hiker story. Months later, digital forensics experts enhanced the footage frame by frame, pushing the grain until shapes bled sharper. What emerged was worse than the blur. In the final clip, just behind Daniel's shoulder, the shadow resolved into something unmistakably human. The outline of a head, the slope of an arm, shoulders angled as if leaning forward. One frame even caught what looked like a pale hand gripping a tree trunk, fingers long, too defined to be mistaken for bark. The room where analysts presented the stills fell silent. One muttered, "That's not an animal. That's a person." When the images leaked, debates reignited, fiercer than before. Some swore it proved Daniel had been followed. Others argued it was pareidolia, the mind seeing human forms in chaos. But for the family, it was validation. His sister said quietly, "He wasn't imagining it. He knew." The second reveal stripped away doubt. Daniel hadn't been alone on that trail. Someone or something stood just outside the frame, watching until the camera caught them too. The footage stirred memories in people who'd once worked those trails. A retired ranger, now living quietly outside Estes Park, finally spoke up. Over black coffee, he admitted, "That canyon always had reports we weren't supposed to log." He described hikers filing strange complaints back in the 90s, hearing footsteps shadowing theirs, voices calling names in the wind, even seeing figures that vanished when approached. Officially, the reports were brushed aside as exhaustion or wilderness anxiety. Unofficially, rangers whispered about the canyon being wrong at night. One account stuck with him. A pair of college kids in '97 who swore a man followed them for miles, keeping just inside the tree line. Searchers went out, found nothing. The report was quietly shelved. When asked why he never spoke sooner, the ranger sighed, tapping his mug. "We were told it scared tourists. Bad for business. Easier to say folks got lost." The revelation added weight to Daniel's footage. Whatever the camera captured, it wasn't the first time shadows had walked that canyon. After the footage leaked, Daniel's disappearance became more than a cold file. It turned into legend. New hikers at Boulder Canyon were warned at the trailhead. Don't go alone. That's where the photographer vanished. Local guides mentioned him in hushed tones, pointing out the stretch of trail where the camera caught his last steps. Flowers appeared there season after season, left by strangers who never knew him. Some hikers admitted they turned back early, claiming the woods felt too still, too watchful. Online, theories multiplied. Forums dissected the footage frame by frame, some swearing it showed a stalker, others insisting it was proof of something not human at all. Conspiracy threads argued the sheriff's office buried reports for decades. For Daniel's family, the legacy was heavier, his name etched into rumor, his memory bound to a grainy video instead of laughter or photographs. His sister told a reporter, "He was more than a mystery. He was my brother." Still, the story spread, as all legends do, shaping the canyon's reputation as a place that doesn't just take hikers, but keeps them. In the end, the camera gave answers and questions in equal measure. It showed Daniel's last moments, the way he slowed, turned, and stared at something just beyond the frame. It caught the blurred outline of a figure in the trees, a hand against the bark, a presence that didn't belong. But then, silence. The final frame faded, the trail empty, the forest swaying as if nothing had happened. No struggle, no sound. Just absence. For investigators, it was evidence without closure. For his family, it was proof without peace. And for everyone else, it was a haunting reminder that even when you're watching closely, some things stay hidden. Today, hikers still sign the logbook at Boulder Canyon. Some glance at the trees before stepping onto the trail, wondering if another lens is watching them too. Because Daniel's story leaves one question that no footage can answer. If the camera saw him vanish, what did it miss? And that's the chilling case of Daniel Cross, the hiker who vanished, and the camera that silently recorded his last steps. But the question still lingers. Who or what was standing behind him that day in Boulder Canyon? Share your theories in the comments below. If this story pulled you in, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss the next mystery. And send this to someone who loves true crime and unsolved disappearances, because the more eyes on these stories, the harder it is for them to stay hidden.